Okay. Okay. Hey, it's Carly.
Hey, it's Shamina.
And we're emotional. Virtual's a little bit of a toughie, but as you guys can see, we have a guest here. So Shamina, take over, girl.
Yes, and those of you who can't see and are just hearing us, we have a special guest today. So I have the great pleasure of introducing our guest. So our guest, her name is Maritza, and Maritza is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's a certified clinical hypnotherapist and qualified supervisor. She's been in practice for 10 years, focuses on trauma and grief healing, and has her words, low-key obsession with personality types such as the MBTI, which stands for the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and Enneagrams. Her pronouns are she, her, hers. She is a millennial, she is a mom, and she is a Latina business owner. But best of all, she has been my mentor throughout my licensure experience, and has become a huge part of the therapist and person that I am today. So please help us welcome Maritza for our podcast today.
Wow, what an introduction. Flattering. Now I'm taken aback. I'm like, oh, mentorship. Oh gosh, okay. That's like a big role to live up to for any of you who have listened to Shamina at all. So so to even be a part of like what conglomerated and made her into the therapist she is like really, really cool for me. So it's equally been enjoyable watching you develop clinically over the years, because that's been a very exciting process to see unfold.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit with us today.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
You know that I care deeply about you, because your supervisor showed up to guest on the podcast on the first day of my vacation.
Yeah.
So that is like, of course it's love, right? Like, and that's why we have coffee.
I feel extra special too now. I did not realize it was your vacation. So now I'm even more appreciative of you as our guest right now today. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, no problem. I don't mind at all. I love talking about all kinds of things, and the opportunity to continue talking about anything in depth with Shamina is always a treat. So, and I'm very excited to meet and talk with you as well, of course.
Yes. I think as you've listened to the podcast, I am a talker. So I definitely do like to get my word out there. So let us jump into what we are going to talk about today. And our focus today is we're going to discuss the millennial wage gap and how the trend around the traditional 9-to-5 or 40-hour work week has been shifting. So I think me and Shamina both said like the first thing that we kind of wanted to jump off with is the impact that COVID had on this. So, we want to get your opinion, and then, me and Shamina can share our thoughts and our stories on how we feel with this whole thing.
And I think from because you've done a lot of like tracking during the pandemic, Maritza, and different trends that we've kind of seen clinically, but also I imagine personally as well. So have you also kind of noticed in both areas of your life this kind of trend of people wanting to work from home as the pandemic kind of continued, that the traditional like 9-to-5, 40 hours a week was even more exhausting during the pandemic? So what are some of the kind of trends that you've seen and that you've experienced in your own life?
Yeah. Like one of the things I think we had talked about earlier on, we may have been talking in a supervision or in another sidebar conversation, but was where I was like really kind of giving clients a lot of education about how our decision making is much more dense all of a sudden because of the pandemic. Meaning when my girls suddenly came home from school. So I am technically a millennial. I always say like, I love avocado toast as much as the next person, but I'm also a generational cusp baby in that I was very close to Gen X. So I'm just bumping up on Gen X. And so I still have a lot of memories from things where I was in high school, but they were in college, but it wasn't out of reach for me. Whereas like younger millennials can be like really radically different for me in a lot of ways. And I'm like, oh, that I see, that's what people are talking about, because I'm a little more at the cusp and between these two places. Excuse me. But one thing that I noticed was like, we're making decisions. And so my girls suddenly came home. I have 2 children. And the decision to put my one daughter back in daycare was like multiple conversations between me and her dad over multiple evenings after having them home, me being at home, locked up in my room doing telehealth, all of a sudden with like zero setup capacity, because before that I had done like a few sessions here or there from the office when somebody needed a lunchtime session. But I didn't have like an extensive setup. It was just like pop on the computer. I'd done it a few times. It was very casual. So all of a sudden I was here all the time. My kids were here all the time. They were all here all the time. We're like, okay, we got to soundproof this and do a lot of things differently. And so every single thing that we had to make a decision on, and sometimes very quickly, took twice, 3, 4 times as long, because we had to factor in like this, we're not really sure what this is, because we didn't really have a lot of clear information. There was a lot of information, but none of it was like clean information. Right. And so you do have to do your own personal discernment. And so we're sitting here, I'm doing my discernment, he's doing his discernment, and it's taking us weeks and weeks to figure out, do we or do we not feel comfortable sending her back to daycare? Before the pandemic, the question would have been like, can we afford it? Yes or no? Yeah. Right. The question would have been like very quick and simple. Like, hey, I've got to go to work more, or I've got this going on and we need childcare. Okay. You know, and now it's like, oh, do we want to do that? But this is wearing us down. So what do we do? Do we make that decision, or do we continue to become maybe more stressed as a family because we can't maintain all the things that we have to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was very different all of a sudden. And people would go, why is this so stressful? Why is this so hard? How come I was doing this before with no problem, and now I have suddenly outgrown it? So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer the question?
I want to, just because you had said something in the very beginning, and I feel like it really, it makes so much sense of, you know, realizing how decision making is even so much harder now with the pandemic. And I think about, I don't have kids or anything, so I feel like even then, like I couldn't imagine having kids going through this. But even without having kids, I was thinking about it as you were talking of my life before the pandemic. Coming home from working the 40-hour was already exhausting, but then like you said, adding on now this stress of a pandemic, and like now stressing about going outside and going to the grocery store, and like, do I want to just have my groceries delivered to me, or do I want to take that risk to go to the store? And so it just added, I think back of when I when the pandemic was like a thing, but we weren't sure what it was yet, and it was just like mentally exhausting. And like coming home, I just had no energy. Like I had no energy. And I think kind of I know what we're talking about, but to point on, I think that's why so many people now are reaching out for their mental health, because, you know, pre-pandemic, you found ways to cope with it. But now in the middle of a pandemic and you're being stuck at home, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't do this by myself anymore. So those are just my thoughts on just what you had said, but it's just, yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
No, you're so right. Like, and it doesn't, like my example is like with my kids, because that's my own life and where it showed up. But like all of my clients, I would tell them, like, it doesn't matter if you're single, that's a whole nother ball game, right? Maybe you live alone during the pandemic. That can get real depressing real quick, right? You might only be FaceTiming with people, and maybe that's not enough. Maybe you're a real in-person person. So no matter like your life situation, this really was the great equalizer when it comes to mental health. And we, I think, have had an opportunity, if we will, like strike when the iron is hot, to get some serious look at the stigmas that we carry and the other things that we seem to propagate in society. Like there's a shameful nature around like having these things. And it's like, yeah, but we're not shaming people in wheelchairs. That's ridiculous. But at one time we did. So like, let's get radical and let's push the envelope, and let's say maybe this is the same type of challenge as a physical challenge. And it is something that can inhibit you just as much, if not even more sometimes in the world, because of the stigma. And so the complexity of our decisions, the weight of that was very heavy. And I definitely, and I know Shamina did as well, like along with me, tracked periods of like malaise, where people were just in like bouts of fatigue. Just everybody I talked to in my personal life, professionally, my clients, we were all experiencing the same global experience during the pandemic. And we were all like going through somewhat like some stages of grief, because everybody's world was just ripped out from under them. But to piggyback on what you were saying, I want to reference back to another podcast where you guys had mentioned like the idea of picking yourself up by your bootstraps, right? And it's very much that kind of thing, because you were saying before, like I did these other things that I could use to cope. Like I maybe went out into the world and had dinner with a friend, or I went for a jog every day, or like even I just like going to the store and perusing, whatever it is that you like to do that was an out thing was suddenly taken away. Or if you wanted to engage with it, you really had to think about it. You had to be much more scrutinizing when you made that decision. And so it's the same kind of thing. Like we have like generations before us, right? They're telling us, like the millennials, like just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, pack it in, like you're going to be fine, just keep going. And in one setting that worked. It wasn't bad advice, because at one point in life, that is what we were doing. You would go to like a labor type job for most people, and you would do a gestalt kind of thing of processing the emotion, right? You'd be very experienced with it. You might like do a labor and you literally like sweat out some anger. You get out some sadness. You do this physical thing that would alleviate the emotional state. But that's not our reality anymore. Who on this right here goes and does some labor every day? I don't.
I try to avoid labor as much as possible.
Like these aren't things that we're commonly doing. It's not that there's no laborers left in our world, but to say that the bulk majority of like the workforce is now like in a cubicle somewhere behind a computer screen, and now even more so with the pandemic. So even more so, we have less and less of an outlet to get those feelings out in a physical way. And that is very soothing for us. And so the old adage of pick yourself up by your bootstraps once was great. Now it falls flat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of what Maritza was talking about earlier with like the different trends, I can remember like messaging her and I was like, are you noticing this with your clients too? Because it's like everybody that I have worked with this week is feeling this way, and I'm now feeling this way, and like I'm over it and I'm done. And so I don't think there's definitely been this big push for mental health that I've noticed within, even in social media, celebrities. There's been so much more ads that I've been seeing about like mental health, telehealth, all of that kind of stuff. But I don't think we quite realize the impact that the pandemic did have on mental health, or just kind of this lack of coping, or this outwardly way of coping was suddenly, Maritza, you had just said, like it's taken from us, and now we don't have any tools or skills to cope, which is where all of the rise in, trauma, the abuse was coming back up. Like everything that we were doing to like avoid or distract ourselves is like, oh, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's gone, and it's so very suddenly gone too. Like, and we have really turned up the volume on distractions. There are a lot of distractions in our world today. So the volume on distractions became very high. It was almost like a feat of genius to be able to like tune that out and figure out what's going on with yourself, right? Like it's like, whoa, you were able to do that? How? Teach me, guru. Because I'm like, how can you drown out the noise? It's everywhere, right? I mean, I even have like had to turn off some notifications on my watch. I go like, does that really need to come to my wrist? Like, do I need to be pinged about that? Because otherwise it's just going off all day for something, and those kind of distractions are everywhere. And then we slow down radically and like are going out, but our decision making became much more complex. And that was a massive stressor to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I joke with Shamina because one, I want to say with both of you, I can remember Shamina when she would call me, she'd be like, oh my gosh, like today is a day. But also I would joke with Shamina of, I feel like the pandemic, if you were like in a relationship, I joke with her of like, it either made you or it broke you, and like, obviously for me, like, I feel like I do think that the pandemic did have something to do with my breakup, in the sense of, I feel like it escalated it, like, I think back and I think I always knew. Actually just recently I found a journal from like 2016 that I literally wrote like the same things that I'm thinking now. But I think because we were in such close quarters, we weren't allowed to go outside. We weren't able to have those distractions that you talked about, or get out and have that physical release of our emotions, that we were just stuck. And then we realized like, whoa, like we aren't it, and we now realized that we're not really, we don't have as much in common as maybe we once did because we're shifting and changing as individuals. So I just think that also, like, the pandemic, I think really, really changed so much of life in general, like not even just work wise, but like the mental health and how we adapt and how we release our emotions. Like you said, with the strapping of the bootstraps, you could go and like be sweating and be like, no, these aren't tears, I'm just sweating.
But it's good, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Carly, you and I kind of have a little bit of similarity, because you ended up quitting your job in the middle of pandemic, and I ended up making a similar decision, but also choosing a full-time work from home position. So what were kind of the deciding factors for you to quit your job?
Yeah, so for me, the pandemic, I really took it seriously. Even still to this day, like, I'm not fully vaccinated. I'm still waiting for my second shot. But if I go to the store, like, I'm wearing the mask, and like, not to like judge or anything, but I'll see people with no mask and I'm like, woo, okay, like, we risky. But I'll say, so what really pushed me was I was already struggling I wasn't really happy, and I just wasn't honestly really happy with the way that my company had decided to handle COVID. I felt like they were really like wanting everyone back full time in office, and they wanted that to happen, which I get it. We need to get back to work, but the way that I saw it was, we are successfully meeting our monthly goals every month. We've never had an issue. Why are you pushing us to go back into office, especially when I personally knew a lot of my coworkers were voicing the same concerns as me, of and so that was, it was a lot was with COVID, of why I finally made that decision. I remember I had decided to take like a 2-week PTO break for the holidays. And I remember it was New Year's Eve, and I had to go back like that Monday. And on New Year's Eve, I was already like starting to like stress out and like just thinking about having to go back. And I remember the next day I just like bawled to my mom, and I was just like, I can't do it. I cannot go back. And so that Monday I put my 2 weeks in, because I was like, you know what? No job is worth my mental health, to the point to where like I can recall driving to work and like out loud telling myself, it's okay, it's going to be a good day, it's going to be a good day, because I just dreaded going to work every single day. And so I feel like the pandemic made me realize, like, we can successfully work from home, and I want to work for a company that respects their employees and is progressive and acknowledges that and has that trust in their employees, of like, you know what, you're successfully completing your job. I'm not going to pressure and micromanage and have to have that control of you being in the office so I know what you're doing kind of outlook. I'm realizing I don't need that. I don't want that.
Yeah, the business that's the abusive partner, right? Like, like we look at it and go, oh, you're like an abusive boyfriend. I don't know if I want to be a part of this, right? Yeah, I love what you're saying about that, because there are people there. I've been seeing a bit of a split. I don't know if Shamina's had a similar experience, but with clients that are talking about work as places are getting reintegrated, of course, that's a conversation that we're diving into in therapy, which is like the work check-in. How are things going there? Are you back in office, partially in office? Are you working from home? Are you potentially working from home permanently? How has this now changed your life, right? Because we spend a huge amount of our lives at work. So for a lot of people, that's the bulk category of their world. And so, of course, we're going to talk about it in therapy, especially as it's been changing with the pandemic. And I see a good portion of people, same as you, they're like, I feel really good being at home and working from home. I'm being productive. I'm doing my job well. Like, I feel really comfortable and good with this. I'm finding maybe a better work-life balance. So that's a lot of people, especially if they have kids or parents and they're trying to get around maybe daycare cost or something like that. And they're kind of flexing their schedules around childcare. These kind of things are happening for a lot of people, and it's going well. And then I have my other portion of the people that are going like, if I don't get back to my office, I am not going to be okay. Like, I'm a go back to work person. I'm learning that about myself. I have to be there. And I'm like, let's honor that for you too, which is, you need the container, right? You need the container to say this is work and this is home. And that's totally fine too. But like you're saying, having an employer that can accommodate all of these different perspectives and needs and say that both of these are valid. And like you said, as long as you are doing the job, then letting you do it in that capacity, in whatever capacity is really going to work for you and help you have better work-life balance, if that's what we want to call it. I kind of feel like balance is a dirty word once you become a mom. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Kristen Kuzmic, but she does a lot of like mom comedy kind of things and inspirational stuff on like Facebook. She's been like over here at Ruth Eckerd and stuff like that. But she says balance is a dirty word. And I'm like, I kind of agree with you. Like, I don't know, what is balance when you're a mom? Just kind of like trying to sort of.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think I agree, because I think more so we're seeing a lot of, remote positions or work from home positions, but I think it's still because we're in a pandemic, but also, from a company's perspective is like, you can have a lot more employees if you don't have to have the office space to house all of them, and if they're doing the work and being productive. And I think, that was also a reason I was working for an agency at the time during the height of the pandemic. And similar to you, Carly, I was like waking up and I was dreading going to work. I was just, the way that I was seeing clients, I was working 9-10 hour days, and it's client after client after client after client after client in the middle of the pandemic, trying to take care of myself, trying to be there and hold space for my clients. And I was like, yo, like, I don't know if I can do this and sustain this anymore. And in the beginning, we were micromanaged. I had to, every hour I was not in therapy, I had to write it down. I had to submit it every week. I had to be very detailed in what I was doing if I wasn't in session. And I had a really big issue with that, because I noticed that, with the pandemic, my productivity at work exponentially increased. I had less cancellations. I had less no-shows. I think that's partially because of the telehealth portion, but things were going very, very well. And I found it very offensive that I had to be monitored and tracked to make sure that I was doing my work.
Your master's degree, right?
Yeah, I got a master's degree, man. I know how to do work.
Yeah,
I need to prove to you that I can operate autonomously, that you can trust me to put in my best effort for this job.
Yeah. And Shamina reminded me, not to cut you off, Shamina, but Shamina reminded me my job did the same thing. But so because I have my master's in social work, so I worked at a nonprofit, and they did it with for your whole 8 hours every single day, Monday through Friday. Once the pandemic started, we had to submit a time log of how we spent our day, and literally had to do it in like 5-minute increments. So like, for example, if we checked our emails for 60 minutes, we had to write, checking email 60 minutes. And I found it just as offensive of like, I am a grown adult. I own my own home. I have my master's degree, and I'm going to work, and I have to fill out a little time log every single day to let you. I found it so offensive. And I even said something to my supervisor at one point of like, you're treating us like children. And like, she was like, oh yeah, but there are some people who are taking advantage. And I'm like, and that's when you look at them and you confront them. You don't now treat everybody else like a child because one or two people are taking it. I totally forgot about that. I try to block that out. But yeah, I was like so offended by that of like, how dare you? We are grown adults, living our lives, paying our bills, and we're coming to work and having to fill out a time log of how we spent our day. Ugh.
Yeah, you're not only having your time micromanaged, but now you're being forced to track it on your own too.
Yeah.
I know when you're working in these positions, especially at the community mental health level, the rhetoric is like, I have time for this.
Yeah.
Do you know what else is like blowing up over here that I need to go tend to, and you want me to like log that it's blowing up? And you just assume my day is full every day because it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just like, oh, so I don't want to get into specifics, but I would have to like, there were clients that would come in, and it was like, oh wait, I gotta fill out my time log real quick before I can go help this client, because I gotta say I spent, it's just like, oh gosh, I hated it.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And I think Maritza brings up a really good point about like this nice divide or this split between people who realize that working from home is not for them, and that they need more of the structure, they need more of the organization. But I think there's also a lot more people who are realizing like, this really works for me and I enjoy this, and there's less less cost for childcare, or, having those flex hours, and being able, or even doing like a hybrid, like you're in office a couple of days and then at home, and just having that freedom and flexibility, I think has really opened a lot of doors for people. And I know for me, the pandemic, and particularly my work environment at the time, put a lot of things in perspective, because as a therapist, like, we have to take on a lot of shit all the time, every day. And I realized very quickly, and obviously it was very early in my infancy as a therapist, but I wanted more out of my life than having to constantly recover and constantly, putting my own things on the back burner because I had to show up and be there for somebody else. And so I think that was a really big catalyst for my decision to change careers, at least the type of career at that moment, and going into more of like a private practice setting and having more freedom and flexibility, because it meant more to me to take care of myself instead of feeling like I had to show up for my clients, because I love my clients. I love what I do for work, but I have to be able to enjoy my life in order to get the fulfillment out of my job that I am, and to be a better therapist. Because if I'm constantly running on empty, how am I possibly supposed to sit here and listen to you and hold space for you? Like, I can't. And I was hitting my limit. And that was I had questioned, can I be a therapist? Yeah. And that was really scary. I was like, I spent a shit ton of money and a lot of time doing this. So I really hope that this was the case. And when I made that transition, it was all kind of confirmed. Like, yes, like, you're doing the right thing. It wasn't in the right environment. You needed to, kind of feel it into your own. And but it was a really hard decision to make. And I even just recently had a conversation with a client who was considering wanting to leave their job. And my go-to was like, do it. Financially, you can, like, do it. And I was like, I know that I'm biased and I will recognize that and I will tell you that. But they were like, you make it sound so easy. And I said, it is. You just have to choose to want that. But we are conditioned to, we need the stability. And I had so many people asking me, like, well, what about health insurance? What are you going to do without your health insurance or your PTO? And I was like, I will figure it out. But this is more important than having some benefits. But that's kind of the mindset, is like, we want the stability, we want the steady paycheck, we want to have the benefits, and we can't get those things unless we work the 40 hours, unless we're putting on all of this time and all of this effort.
That's the lie that's been given to us, right? That's the lie that's been like passed out or projected onto our generation. And I think bringing it back to like being a millennial, the one thing that I'm like so proud to be in this generational bracket is because I think millennials are bringing radical authenticity to the forefront like never before. And they're saying, we don't all do it the same. And why don't we just let everybody show up, be part of this ecosystem in the way that they are created to do so, or in the way that they are inspired to do so, or whatever you want to, what language you put around it, I have no preference. But, letting people show up that way and saying, okay, so Shamina really enjoys being a telehealth therapist. She's working from home successfully. She's enjoying the setting. She feels like she can still continue to connect with her clients. This works for her. And it's proving in the quality of therapy that she's getting, right? So, or we could put her back in a big machine that's going to burn her out. She's going to pump out quality over quantity. And her clients are only ever going to go as far as she can reach. And we've capped her out in things like low income and low payouts. And we've capped her out in things like hours that she's in the chair. So then she gets home and she has to like sit and plug her ears and go in a dark hole for like, hours to kind of soothe everything that she's been holding for a huge amount of people who are stressed during a pandemic when she's also living in a pandemic herself. And that's been our experiences. Like, I've been trying to hold as much space for all of my supervisees as much as possible and reminding them, you're in a pandemic too. Don't forget that. So in a time when mental health care providers needed to ramp up their self-care and their ability to nurture themselves more than ever, we had less time because the floodgate, we almost couldn't hold back the amount of people coming in. It has blown up how many people are coming into therapy. And on the one hand, that's fantastic. And on the other hand, there's not enough of us to go around, and we suddenly know it.
Yeah, I'll say for me, I started feeling unhappy with my job back in April, not this past April, but April 2020. But I remember like voicing it to like my family members. And I remember my brother, who he's my oldest, and he's like got his life on track, you know. He was like, yeah, but you won't have health insurance, and you know, like you won't have your stable income. Like, is this really, like, are you really that unhappy? And so I was like, you know, and so I put it off because like I put it off for 9 months. And then, you know, it got to a point where I was literally crying. And I was just like, I would never recommend that for anyone. Like, if you have these thoughts, I think it's for a reason. And I would not, you know, let anyone else sway you, because at the end of the day, it's my life. And I will say, like, the reason why I did hold off for so long is because I had started therapy in October when I first, like, decided to break up with my ex, and I really didn't want to lose that because I wasn't paying anything because of my insurance, and I was so scared. But if I would have just spoke up to my therapist, she offered you know, a discounted rate for me because of the rapport that we had built. And she, you know, she was like, I know people go through, you know, situations like this, and I don't want them to stop therapy because they can't afford it. So if I would have just spoke up to her before,
like last night
sooner, yeah, I would have quit way sooner. But yeah, it just, I ended up waiting until I was like at this point to where it was just like not a good space for me, that I was just so miserable. Like, I can remember coming home from work, like kind of you said, like I would just shut down and I would just literally lay on the couch and put like a whatever show on in the background, and then I would eat dinner, and then I would shower and go to bed, because I just did not have any mental energy left to deal with anything. Like, at the time, my partner was like, do you want to go do something? And I was like, I can't, because it will literally stress me out. Even though it's something that can be fun, I can't do it. I can't. It's not fun to me anymore because I just have no energy.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that you were like pouring so much of yourself into so many hours a week had become the thing that was draining and exhausting you for actually living your life. And I think so many of us, like in the millennial generation, right? So like my parents are boomers. I have very young parents actually. They had me at 18.
Okay.
So they are right at the end of the baby boomer generation. I'm right at the beginning of the millennials. So I think most millennials have like boomer parents. So we've watched our parents work for retirement,
Yeah.
right? We watched all of them work for retirement, and some of them are already there or approaching it. And we're seeing and hearing their complaints about
Mhm.
what's not there for them and how hard it still is and all this. And we go, wait a second, wait a second. So all those hours that you weren't home with me, that you worked till forever because I was a latchkey kid, because we had to get by, amounted to what? Well, I don't want to do that. Right. So
Yeah.
like, well, wait a second. I would like to just see my kids. Can I do that? But like also like have a thing that's my own, my career, my passion, or whatever you want to call it, and do that as well. Like I feel like there's a way to do both of these things, right? So I'm not just working for retirement. And I think that's the thing that millennials are like in droves, just saying, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to just slave away now for some future one day. We're going, but like, what if it's today? What if it's like right now? What if this is the moment I could be the happiest I've ever been?
Mhm.
Why would I not engage with that? You know,
Absolutely.
there are other ways to get insurance. There's other ways to build in, you know, other things. But that's why, and Shamina and I talked about it, like the idea of like, why does my therapist charge so much, right? Well, your therapist charge so much, especially in private practice, because I have to take care of my family and I have to have these things in place, just as if I were working at a larger company. I still need to be able to have time off without going hungry. So it's not just the time in that, you know, 45, 50 minutes that you're there. It's all my education. It,
Mhm.
you know, all of these other things that I have to create for myself because I want to be able to provide this quality or this level of treatment when I come to my profession. And so I've said, this is the setting where I'm most able to do that. But then that means, yeah, we have to charge a certain amount to be able to create that life for ourselves. So there's ways of getting it done. But when we believe, because we falsely believe that it's only in this container, we don't all fit that container. Some people are happy there. Some people are doing it and they're rocking it and they're making it work. But those of us who don't fit that mold are looking like, how come I get all the good stuff? Like
yeah
I'm doing the thing. I'm checking off the box. I checked off the box. Why didn't I get the reward? Why don't I feel happy? What's wrong with me? Right? And it's like, nothing. Nothing is wrong with you. Nothing at all. You're just preferencing different things. You have different interests, you have different goals, you have a different makeup that wants to do it differently. And we're now getting to the point where we're saying, like, could we all just do it the way that suits us best so we can actually be probably more happy and more productive?
Yeah. And I think when we have, the shift in mindset, the older generations are, coming at us with like, you're lazy, you don't want to work for it, you don't want to, even with the whole issue with like unemployment and people want higher wages and things of that nature. I think we're realizing like shit is expensive. And so, even going back to like the therapy thing is, if somebody's seeing us in private practice and we charge a certain fee, but they are living just for their job and to work. And so it's a choice. Do I take this time and go to therapy and pay this fee, or do I use that time to make more money and being able to save that because it doesn't seem worth it to me? And so I think we're getting a lot of backlash, this generation in particular, of being seen as, we don't want to work for it. We're very lazy. We're asking too much because we want more money, more value. We want to be valued. And I think this generation gets very swept under the rug, and that, there's a certain stigma kind of around this generation. And I wonder if that's caused by the fact that we want change. And so we are very radical with it and very open with it, as opposed to other generations who are very cookie cutter. And so, kind of in the grand scheme of things, whenever you have some type of population who makes noise, other people don't like it because they're trying to change the status quo, and we want to stay stagnant and stay in this homeostasis. And so I think, I wonder if that's why we're getting so much pushback from, the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Well, I will say Shamina hit so many points, and I think like just so many things that to touch on what she said. But with they think that we're lazy, and I'll say for me, a personal example is I have my master's. I had to spend certain money to get that, and I'm now acknowledging and realizing my worth. And like, I think mental health and social services, nonprofits in general, they're not given the recognition of all of this hard work that we do every single day. And so like, for an instance, when I had quit my past job, and I had started looking, and I had gotten an interview. This was, I hadn't even quit yet. So I was just looking, and it's just, there's like a meme out there that's like, you need to have your master's, but we pay $15 an hour. And I literally had an experience of like that, of this company had called me. It was a nonprofit, and, I had to have my master's and everything, but the max pay that they could pay was like $38,000. And I was like, I have my master's, like, is this not, and it just doesn't mean anything because no one takes like mental health and nonprofits they don't respect it, in my opinion. And then like what Shamina said, I feel like with our generation of us being radical and we're not accepting just what all the other generations did, we're like, no, this isn't right. Like, we shouldn't live like this. And so I feel like so many people they're no longer accepting the minimum wage because, one, I feel like minimum wage workers literally do the hardest work out there. Like, you're out there, like, having to like clean toilets and things like that, or, make people's food, and you're getting paid minimum wage to barely make your rent every month. No one wants to live that life. No one. And so I think that when the pandemic hit, and some people had lost their jobs and then started getting the unemployment government assistance, and was realizing, wait, I'm making more money not having a job than I was having a job. Yeah, I'm not going to look for a job again, because they were, companies, these big, McDonald's or whoever, just the big corporate company, corporate America is wanting to hire people for like $8 an hour and working them to their death. Like, you are working them so hard. No, we're realizing our worth. We're not doing that anymore. Like, I'm sorry. I don't care if I don't have a degree or not. I'm a human being. Don't work me to where the wage that you're paying me is not even, enough to feed my kids or make my rent. no, we need to balance this out. It's unacceptable, in my opinion. This is my opinion. I get into rants, but
Oh yeah, I do too. Actually, like I'm a big. You can ask Shameen. I'm a big time soapboxer. Like if I can soapbox about something, oh, I'm gonna. Like it's just I can't stop myself.
yeah.
But I love what you're saying because yeah, there's the discrepancy in the pay, and it's like we're all like grappling over peanuts. You know what I'm saying? Because other people, like I look at, my partner. He was a EMT for 13 years. So a lot of people in that community in those positions are saying like, oh, like, so McDonald's workers will get paid $15 an hour, but a new EMT gets paid 9. Like, why should they get money? And it's like, no, we're not saying they should be raised up. We're saying all of you should,
Yes.
it's not you against them. Let's not do the us versus them thing. Let's all of us, our valuation system is askew. What we're valuing, what we're paying very highly for, and what we pay very low for is off, right? And millennials are like, hang on, let's reevaluate this because we've been giving money to things like oil, and millennials are like picking up environmental scraps going, oh my gosh, the planet's falling apart, right? And we feel responsible for it because it's just like trickling down to us. And then like we want to sit here and like huddle up in the rainforest and be like, don't, cut down these trees and stuff. And now we're weird, and not wanting to go to work. And it's like, no, this is the work you left me. I'm doing the work that trickled down to my generation. This is the work. The work is for us to get radically authentic, to like actually meet one another in these places and discuss and start to talk about the ways in which our social contracts have gone very poor, the ways in which they have subjugated people, the ways in which they continue to subjugate people. So I look at the statistics for like, I recently looked into this. This was like a new discovery for me. So I am, my mom's like white woman from the South, from Tennessee. My dad, though, is from Cuba. So I grew up bicultural, is what I say, because presentation wise, I look like a run of the mill white woman out in the world. But you meet me, my name is Maritza, which is actually a watered down version of my name that I say for people because I grew up in Tennessee and no one could pronounce it. So my name is actually Marisa. And so you obviously know I'm, Hispanic in some way when you meet me and talk to me and these kind of things. And so growing up like bicultural, I had the privilege of being in both of these worlds. But what I didn't know is how much this one side of my world was going to impact my future. And I started to look into the statistics on like Latinas and pay, and they are the lowest paid female Hispanic women are the lowest paid bracket of all the brackets, like all the categories, they're down at the bottom. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? And the statistic that really shocked me was that when they got higher education, it did not close the gap. So meaning a Latina woman like myself walking around with higher degrees is getting paid still significantly less than the majority like Caucasian male. And the gap did not close with education, because one of the things they wanted to know is, were they just doing the lower paid jobs? Like, is that it? Is that what we're seeing? Like, they're just more represented here. And it was like, guess what? No, they're carrying PhDs and they're getting huge fractions of the pay, like huge deductions in their pay. And it's like, there's all of this stuff that is systemically and through our narrative, through our language given to us, that causes us to continue these cycles, like as a community, as a whole, not like one person, but all of us, we're all doing it. And I go back to what you're saying about, I think you said 36 or 38,000. I can't remember what the salary was for the position. When I started as a therapist, as a master's level therapist, my first position was 30. And so I had a master's. I worked in a specialized program where I was trying to keep children from being removed from their parents. And it was very, very intense work. And the pay was $30,000 a year. And at the time I qualified, I'm pretty sure, for like government assistance, like food stamps and things like that. So I was a master's level therapist, working, 40 plus hours a week, doing this really intense therapy work for $30,000. And that was just like the normal pay. That was just like what you got paid for it. And so the rhetoric was like, you're not in it for the money. And I'm like, well, obviously, or I wouldn't be here. Obviously. But I'm like, it's as though to say that being in it for the money would be sinful in some sort of way. Like, that's a bad thing to want to take care of myself so that I can take care of my clients. And we do this. And so our evaluation system has become very skewed. And I think that as millennials, we're seeing this and we're starting to go, but actually, as a whole, as a generation, we actually value these things more. So collectively, like we're all individual and unique, but collectively we're sort of starting to value these different things. And those values are showing through, and they're very different from the previous generations. They're radically different. And that's why I think we're showing up radically authentic. And that is scary to people. Let's be honest. Being authentic sets people off. Okay. They don't enjoy that life.
And I think kind of going back to the earliest statement that we had made is, about how with Carly's relationship, like the pandemic kind of put things in perspective of her relationship. But I think on a generational level, the pandemic has put things in perspective that our system is broken and we are trying to improve, and that money is not always the motive. And yes, we want to have it. And Carly and I always talk about it all the time. Like, can we just go back to like the bartering system? Like, can we do that? Because I think that would be really great. But we are so money hungry, so money driven, and that's been passed down through generations. And I think through even the minorities is that, you hear these stories of like, we have to work so much harder. We have to do all of these things. We have to, in order to be successful in this country and in this climate. And that's not okay, because we're tired and we're exhausted, and there has to be more. And I think our generation is kind of on this cusp of, we want more out of life. We want more than just working. We want more than having to kind of prove our worth, our identity, our culture, our race, our whatever to everybody else. And we just want to exist and kind of live these long and fulfilling lives, but everything else is a barrier against that. And so, it's kind of this, I think the pandemic is starting to kind of unite people, but it's also, we're seeing so much more separation between the generations.
Yeah.
And I'll say that I think that it needs to be said, because I think we all know, but it's not that we're not willing to work. We are definitely willing to work. I think we work very hard, but we're work smarter, not harder, like I think that 2 weeks of PTO a year is absolutely unacceptable. Like, you're telling me that I only get 2 weeks of a year to enjoy my life freely and not have to worry about the stress. Like, obviously weekends, like I think that we need to move to 4-day work weeks, 3-day weekends, because you're telling me I only get 48 hours in between a work week to enjoy my life. Because let's be real, when I get off of work at 5, I'm not getting to enjoy. I'm going home, making dinner, finish doing housework, taking care of kids. I'm not relaxing. And so I think that, going back to it, our generation is realizing that we want to enjoy life more. We're willing to put that work in. I think we work hard, but we're also realizing that, like, I don't want to work my life away and then I get 60 and okay, now I'm retired and what am I going to do? My bones are, hopefully not horrible, but you know what I mean? Like, no, I think we should be allowed and not feel guilty about wanting to enjoy our lives in our 20s and our 30s, and not have that pressure of like, ooh, you're not working right now. Like, ooh, how you pay? Like, I feel like that's how people have kind of looked at me of like, since I quit, and I'm just kind of like, you know what? Like, money's not everything. As long as I have enough to pay my bills at this point, I want something that, like, to me, when I've been interviewing, a really big question is, what's the culture like of your company? And how did you handle? Is I feel like the way that you handled COVID to me is like a big decision maker. And again, like the culture, like I want to know that my opinion is going to be respected and you take your employees input and you actually do something with it, and just instead of just like, oh, we heard you, but that's we decided against that. It's like, no, we're on the front lines here, we're doing the work. I think we have the best experience and input to say about whatever. But I think we're definitely willing to put that work in, but we also want to enjoy our life.
Yeah, instead of you get to enjoy it once you're done working, and then you can you can take the vacations, you can take the trips, you can go back into your hobbies and doing all of these things. It's like, why do we have to wait all of our lives to do that? Like, I want to do that now. I want to travel now when I'm able-bodied and capable. And not that you're not capable when you retire, but you have more energy, you have more willingness, you're able to explore and experience things instead of like, you have to wait until you retire to go do those things.
Yeah, well, I mean, ask anybody who's ever worked in the hospice setting if anybody on their deathbed has ever said, you know, I really wish I'd made more money. You know, on their last breath, they're like, man, you know, I wish I would have made more money. I wish I would have had more material gain in the world that I'm about to leave. And nobody does, right? It's like, I wish I would have spent more time with friends and family and loved ones. That's the bulk of like what they hear. If you're really interested, you can like Google statistics on it. They're out there. But to say that, yeah, like we're saying like we would like to be able to have the permission to now do it differently, because we are picking up the pieces of some of the systems before that didn't sustain, right? So there were some systems that were created by previous generations, and to their credit, I'm sure that they were needed. I was not living in those moments, and therefore I can't speak to what their sort of purpose, if you will, was. But for us, there has been a lot of scrutiny on our generation, like you guys talked about being lazy. And I think it's interesting, me being like what I call elder millennial. Being an elder millennial is like, no, I got kids and I'm like coming home and I'm doing dinner, bath, bed, and it's like a whirlwind. And then the weekend is like full of like cleaning up from the what we didn't get to for the week, and then getting ready for the next week, and that's about it. And I'm going like, wait, when do I have time to like savor anything? Like anything. I'm like, why is life so fast? You know, and that's the thing that for me, it's like that doesn't really match the speed and the way in which I want to live. And so a lot of us are kind of speaking up, going like, hey, I think I kind of want to do it my own way. Is that cool? And everybody's like, no.
Yeah.
No, we need you to follow the traditional path so that you're predictable, so that we can like, so that the system can support you. Because if you step outside of it, we don't know what's going to happen. It's new. And that's where the change piece comes in, where I think a lot of millennials are, maybe on a personal level, can be somewhat change averse, but generationally, I think we're a little less change averse. We're kind of like, yeah, let's change that and see if it gets better. Like we like to improve things. And so again, like we want to work more efficiently and effectively, but we don't want to burn ourselves out to do it. We want to be able to fill all the categories of life, not just the work slice, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll say, I joke because I'm definitely at this extreme right now. So I know that I'm like a little swayed, but I think like you had made points of like, you know, you go home, you take care of your kids. And so for me, I'm 27 and like I right now have no interest in having children because it's like I don't want to have to do that. And like I even joke with Shamina being an extreme of like the next partner I have, like I don't want them to expect that like because I'm the woman, I'm going to be cleaning the house, I'm going to be making the meals and serving them. Like no, absolutely not. Like, you know, and I just think that like older generations, that was what was expected, you know, for the most part in most cultures. And I am just like totally at this extreme of like, you are a grown adult. You can, you know, like, I think it needs to be a balance of like, yeah, I'll make dinner sometimes, but you should absolutely be in the kitchen just as much. And like, just like, and then also I go into the tangent of body hair. Like, why are women expected to be like clean shaven, but men like don't have to shave anything? Like, no, my legs gonna be hairy some days because sorry, don't have that standard. But that's just a whole nother topic. But yeah, but it's just these extremes. But like you had said, of like we're trying to fill all of these areas of our life fulfillment, but right now where it's at, it's like work is just like why 40 hours a week? Who said that that's what you have to do? Why can't it be 30? Why can't it be however long it takes you to successfully complete the job? Why does there have to be, you have to be in the office or you have to be logged on for 32 hours? Why?
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing like the bootstraps. You know, we can probably look and we can do some research and we can probably find some reasons why the 40-hour work week was how it got structured and why it worked, right? We can find some of that, like that it was needed. But then it's given to us as the template of normal. This is the traditional go fit the mold, do the thing, be productive in this way. But our world has changed. Our world is different. So it's not making sense anymore. And it's becoming incredibly stressful. So again, the same old adage of pull up your bootstraps once made a lot of sense. It checked out, but it doesn't today. And that's where I think, because so Gen X is kind of squished between boomers and millennials, right? They're a smaller generation, they got squished in there, and they tend to be like I don't know, I noticed them to be defined by some bit of melancholy, right? The grunge generation, if you will. And love that, because I consider myself, like, I was big into grunge, and I also love avocado toast, you know, right there on the cusp of it. It's good stuff being there. But anyways, saying that, like, the baby boomer generation was a massive, huge generation. And then the millennials came about and we're like, oh, hold my beer, you know, we'll be even bigger. And we were. And that is one of the first times that we've seen such a large generation come about. And everybody kind of went, what's going to be the impact? And then we've had so many things that have, like I said, systems that have broken down, things that don't work anymore, major advancements in technology, which have put us in a, sorry, you're going to hear the, anyways, you can see all these things happening. And so we've had to learn how to do it differently. We've had to say, like, hang on, this isn't working, and it doesn't work for everybody this way. There are people who are still, like I said, very hardwired to like those kind of structures and to like that kind of system, and let them do that. That's great. But we're trying to say, but what if we make space for a lot of representations of the human experience? What if we do that? You know, would that be radical? Yes. But that's what I think a lot of millennials are like pushing to do, is like, what if we give room for more of a spectrum of human experiences? And I think that, not to get too, like, I guess, I don't know, like political or whatever you want to call it, but I was thinking about like gender pronouns and things. I had a process with a client who was kind of like going through questioning about their pronouns and this kind of thing. We talked about it and how that wasn't something that they wanted to share with their family, because they have the type of family that's going to say, but we never had to worry about this before.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, as a therapist, I tend not to give advice because I don't live in your shoes. It's not really the role of a therapist. But I did give a reflection back and I said, yes, and we've always had this. We just let you decide for the other.
Mm-hmm.
We let the majority decide for the other what their experience was. And we just smashed that on to minorities and women and you know, LGBTQ plus community. All of these people we've just had, if you're not in the norm, an experience has been given to you about what you're supposed to socially agree is your experience. And even though your experience may be radically different, there hasn't been a lot of room for that until recently. And so I think we're trying to make more and more space for all these experiences to come up so we can go, okay, what all do we have to honor here? How many variations are there? Like, how many different ways could we engage with, like, work-life balance? How many different ways could we, you know, do work? Do we have companies that are all from home? Do we have them that are blended? Is everybody going to offer some of both? What's our future here going to look like? And the pandemic was like the great pressure cooker that forced us to look at the things that weren't working. So like you talked about your relationship, we had droves of couples come into therapy. I had one like section of time during the pandemic, it was just couples. Everybody was like, oh my, do you do marriage counseling? Do you do couples counseling? Like, just couples, couples, couples. And I kept telling you, you're in a pressure cooker. So anything that was there before is like, the volume is turned way, way up on that. And you can't ignore it now. So whatever it was, whatever little pieces of discord, whatever things you were avoiding or obsessing over or whatever, that's the volume is turned up on. And we really saw it in our relationships big time. But I think also now we're seeing it at work because it's gone on so long. We're kind of reevaluating that category and going, what should we do here?
Absolutely. Wise words.
And I just want to point on how you had said with the pronouns, of how you said before, you know, people were choosing for other people. So, and I think it's interesting because I have, you know, some work experience with that. And it's so funny to me that if I were to introduce myself and say, hey, I'm Carly, I use pronouns she, her, hers, how offended someone else would get by me just acknowledge it was, you know, and it was
by your pronouns. Like, how dare you introduce yourself as an obvious gender that I can see in front of me?
Yes. And
so ambiguity about where I stand. So here's who I am. I thought I would introduce myself.
Absolutely. And I just think, you know, I just kind of laugh because it's like, I'm not pushing this on you. I'm literally just letting you know, but it was almost like I'm pushing something onto them. And it was like, whoa, like you seem really upset right now because I'm just letting you know how I identify. Like,
Yes.
You know, like, let me know, how do you identify, you know, like, let's get this out on the table. But it was just, I just thought it was so interesting how, like, you know, but I think it brought back to how you said, like, older generations, they just kind of told you how to represent other people. And it was like, who are you to tell me who I am?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think, go ahead, Maritza.
Oh no, I was just saying they were very much like, here's your experience, here's your little starter kit, boom, there you go, you know, and go and follow the path and be amazing and all that. But then a lot of people are like, hey, my starter kit didn't fit. Like, I tried it on and it was like the worst look ever. Like, don't give me that wardrobe again, you know. And those people are just like, can I just please fight for my right to like have a different sort of look about me, to have a different wardrobe that I'm trying on, to kind of just not be maybe what you believe my norm is.
Yes.
You know, because we have so much been like, I'm going to tell you who you are, so you look female, so now I'm going to be saying she. And don't get me wrong, we do this for like brevity's sake, right? We're just trying to be like quick, and maybe in passing, I'm not going to like mull over your gender identity or something. If I'm just passing you in the grocery store, like, what do I care? I'm just trying to get my rice, you know. Like, I'm not really, you know, thinking about these things as I'm just going about my day. But it's like, if we're sitting in a space with somebody, we're having a conversation with somebody, like, are we not giving them that space? Like, we always give space for, what do you do for a living, right? What do you do for work? I'll let you identify however you identify there, but not in your own skin. And that is a little bizarre, but we're working on it, right?
Yes. And I think that alone brings up a really good point, is that, you know, we've kind of been handed down these like starter kits of like how you identify in a personal level, and that's more known, and that is where a lot of the conversation has been recently. And that's an easier area for us to identify of like, this doesn't fit for us anymore, this is old type of thinking, this is old, we want an updated version of this. But I think we're now starting to see it bleed into the work life, and that this is old and we want an updated new version of what productivity looks like, what our traditional work week looks like, because we're not fitting into that mold anymore. But it's not, up until recently, that really hasn't been much of the majority of the conversation. It's been kind of these other like social constructs that have been happening. And so I think the movement is now starting to go in this direction. It's always been there, but we've been able to distract ourselves or cope, or it works. It definitely works, this kind of like traditional value idealistic of what it looks like. And so I think it's been easier to put it off for so long until the pandemic hit, and that was really kind of an eye-opening moment of like, this is different and we need to kind of address this issue for sure.
Well, I think the pandemic made us realize that, yeah, we can distract ourselves and we can put stuff off for so long, but it'll catch up. You don't know when, but it's going to catch up. And like, I think I'm going to speak personally, but I feel like it kind of goes with like the millennial age group of, personally for me, I don't like the word normal, because I think what's normal, because Shamina's normal is not my normal. And so I just think that, and I know that I still use it, but I try to catch myself in using other words, because I just think, and I think again, it's because of the age that I'm at and the life that I'm growing up of, I want us all to live authentically, and I want you to be who you are, and I want to respect you as an individual. And so I'm not going to say that because you're not who I am, you're not normal, you know, like, why am I normal? I don't think that I'm normal. So I think how you had gone back to like the balance, like to me, like normal's a dirty word. Like, don't use that word, because no one's normal. No one's normal.
Yeah. What does that look like? How do we really measure normal? Especially when we have so many different nuances. Exactly. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like, our language is a big deal, especially when we look at the social contract and the social contracts that we make. Like, I always say, like, with judgments. So judgments are something that we do, but we've kind of lost sight of their purpose, right? So we make quick judgments of the mind to determine things like safety, right? So is that your dog?
Sorry, someone's clearly at the door and they won't stop. I'm like, in my head, I'm yelling like, be quiet, but I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
Riley, I was like, mute yourself until the dog.
Oh yeah, I guess I should have done that. I'll do that right now. Sorry, keep talking.
No worries. The dogs are just like, I want to be a part of this. I've really got something to say on this topic. They wanted to contribute, and that's totally fine. But to say that we do judgments, and they're there for a reason, so we can like discern things, right? We need to be discerning about, like, if an environment feels unsafe, we need to remove ourselves so we can keep ourselves safe. And this is just like a sort of primitive inborn thing that we do. But what we've done as we've created these complex social structures, like workplaces and things like that, we've taken these judgments and we've formed them into stereotypes. And the stereotypes are now getting contracted as truth, right? Socially. And it's like, whoa. No, it was just a stereotype. It was sort of like a generality to describe some labeled group of people. And that's like a thing that we do. We even do it in research, right? So we have to put like labels and containers on things so that we can like measure them in the data world. So it's got to have a frame, a box that it goes in. And so there's nothing inherently like bad about that. But the way that we have all agreed that this means this equals this as fact has become very toxic in our society. And that's how we continue to like disparage and subjugate certain groups of people. And then we all like hear this language, and the language causes us to go, okay, this language is good or this language is bad. And like you're talking about, a lot of millennials are like, easier to split hairs on language, right? Like, oh, normal. Oh, what is normal? I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with that. And it makes sense because we're like, okay, let's recalibrate, because the language, I think, is getting tangled up, and maybe what you're saying is normal and I'm saying is normal are two totally different things, right? There's a good possibility that we're saying the same word and we're not actually having good communication. We're not on the same page. And so we're starting to scrutinize those things and look at them and turn them over. And that means a lot of things. Like, we're going, hey, we got to look at people being able to determine their own gender pronouns. That one was me, so my apologies.
We were all like, what?
Was
Where
on.
did it come from?
Yeah, no, my do not disturb was on for 1 hour, and now it is like, I'm turning off on you.
Gotcha. That's too funny.
I
But
told you.
I think, you know, I think that all of these topics and discussions, and even the language thing is another, you know, we could go on for like another hour just with that alone. And so I think I'm really appreciative of you coming on, Maritza, because I very much value your opinion and your insight. And I think that this was a really great topic to have you on as a guest, and being able to offer kind of your experiences and what you've seen, because it's such an important conversation to have. And we're all kind of having it right now, but not publicly, not openly, not enough. So I really wanted to thank you for being able to kind of share with us, you know, your thoughts and your experiences, and just being here with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks to both of you for having me. And I saw that you're now international, which is super cool. So kudos on that. And hopefully it keeps expanding. Because yeah, it was really fun. I really enjoy doing this stuff. As Shamina knows, I like just talking about things. Doesn't matter. You could be like, do you want to talk about this? I'll be like, absolutely. But as long as it's somewhat conceptual and I can kind of explore it in an open-ended way, I'm like, I'm game for that. So it was awesome to come and talk to you guys about it and learn about some of your experiences in the workplace as like younger millennials than myself, because I do think millennials, we come in at actually a huge bracket. And so I know in a lot of ways, there's a lot of things that I feel I identify with. And then there's a few things where it's like, oh, that's a little further from me because I am much older. And when I hear some of the stereotypes, I go, oh, I can tell they're talking about the people just under me, just younger than me, because they had more maybe computer and social media influence than I did. You know, I remember my first computer. Some millennials just, it was always there. So I think that makes a little different feel to a millennial, but it's interesting to hear about our different perspectives and work and what's been going on there for the pandemic.
Absolutely. And I want to say thank you for coming on, because I really enjoy, I'm a talker too. I could talk about anything all day, but I really enjoyed our conversation. And now whenever Shamina brings you up, I can picture you. And I'm like, okay, now I know. So yeah, but thank you. Yeah, it's definitely thank you for coming on. And going back to, you know, Emotionful, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, reach out to us. We have the social media, but also our email, emotionfulpod@gmail.com, or you can text us 813-444-3482.
So our final question for all of our viewers and just anybody in general is, are you feeling full yet?
Are you?
Are you?
Are you?
we want to hear from you guys, kind of your perspective about the traditional 40-hour work week, the 9 to 5. What is your feedback with that? How do you feel about that? We want to know. So please.
So for the listeners, hashtag feeling full, get it out there.
Yeah, feeling full.
Yes, absolutely. If any of our listeners do have any specific questions for Maritza in general, or anything that she kind of talked about, please let us know, and we can kind of help to get those questions answered by you. So again, we want to thank Maritza for spending her first day of vacation on our podcast with us, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your break and take care of yourself and have fun with your family.
Yeah, absolutely. So good to have you.
Thank you.
No, that's not right. I didn't say it right. So good to be here.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm like, hang on, wait. My vacation brain kicked in. Did you say it?
We covered up for you.
Yeah, you're good. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.